On a quiet summer night in 1998, a family of 6 drove east on Interstate 40 through the Arizona desert. They were traveling from Bakersfield, California to Wisconsin, with a U-Haul trailer carrying their belongings hitched behind their Toyota 4Runner. It was around 2 a.m. on August 6th, and the highway near the Arizona-New Mexico border was nearly empty at that hour. Champing Tamavong, the father, drove in the left lane while his wife Bothong and their 4 children dozed inside, unaware of the danger approaching from behind. 2 of their 4 children, Chansami and Abby Tamavong, lost their lives in an instant when tragedy struck on that highway. Suddenly, Champing noticed 2 18-wheelers approaching behind him in tandem, and he decided it was best to switch lanes, a decision which would prove fateful. As Champing guided the SUV into the right lane, one of the overtaking semi-trucks suddenly slammed into the rear of the family's U-Haul trailer. The impact was devastating, and the 4Runner flipped over and went rolling out of control. In the chaos, 9-year-old Chansami and 6-year-old Abby were ejected from the tumbling SUV and died upon hitting the pavement. Their 2 older siblings, Somlith and Siphon, survived the wreck, but sustained serious injuries in the violent rollover. For the parents, the scene was a nightmare. Amongst the wreckage, 2 of their children were seriously injured, with the other 2 gone forever, and the highway around them was eerily silent after the brief eruption of violence. In the immediate aftermath, as dust settled around the overturned 4Runner, the family realized that the trucks were gone. Both big rig drivers had fled into the night, leaving the Tamavongs alone amid the wreckage. Arizona State Highway Patrol officers soon arrived at the scene and took charge of the investigation. They found little evidence to go on. The only clues were fragments of a semi-truck's front bumper strewn across the road. Those broken pieces were key to identifying what kind of vehicle had caused the crash. Using these bits of wreckage, investigators determined the culprit vehicle was a tractor-trailer rig, likely a Volvo Semi or similar model. Bumper pieces and paint traces indicated a tan or light bronze cab, possibly accented with red. Investigators knew that Volvo had recently acquired GMC's heavy truck line. The suspect rig might have been sold under either the Volvo or white GMC brand. This forensic analysis gave authorities something concrete to hunt for. Bulletins went out to body shops and trucking companies, alerting them to look for any truck matching that description, especially one with recent front-end repairs. The cops suspected that the truck had likely been quickly repaired to cover its involvement, perhaps by someone who was paid big money for a secretive job. For all intents and purposes, the ghost truck and its driver had vanished without a trace into the desert darkness. The investigation struggled to make headway in the aftermath of the crash. Desperate for new leads, authorities turned to the public for help. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries on national television in 1999. The show presented the Tamavong family's harrowing story to a wide audience and showed an image of a truck similar to the suspect vehicle, hoping someone might recognize it. And to put things in context, getting on Unsolved Mysteries was huge. In 1999, the show reached 10 million viewers per episode in the United States and Canada combined. To put it another way, the perpetrator or perpetrators had a good chance of having seen the episode themselves, and someone who knew them saw it with virtual certainty. Viewers were urged to contact the Arizona State Police or the show's tip line with any information about the mystery driver responsible for the girls' deaths. For a time, investigators pinned their hopes on this exposure, praying that a colleague, a mechanic, or perhaps a witness from I-40 that night might finally come forward. But as weeks and months passed after the broadcast with no results, the Tamavongs were again left waiting for a breakthrough that never came. With no suspect identified, speculation abounded about how and why the tragedy occurred. One theory is that the truck driver might have fallen asleep at the wheel, though this doesn't adequately explain why there were two trucks involved. Fatigue is a known hazard on long-haul routes, especially in the pre-dawn hours, and a dozing or impaired trucker might not notice the family's SUV until it was too late. Upon realizing the horror of what happened, the driver may have panicked and fled, afraid of facing the consequences of his action. Again, though, this doesn't explain why the second driver wouldn't have stopped. Another related theory is that the trucker who struck the SUV may have been under the influence of the crystal drive-all-night delight. It's one thing to fall asleep at the wheel and cause a tragedy like this, but if the trucker did it while under the influence, he could be looking at extremely serious prison time. If he was hopped up on big rig rocket fuel, this may have been why he fled the scene. The presence of the second truck is another lingering question, and the role of this second vehicle still isn't entirely understood. It's a possibility that the two truck drivers were driving recklessly in a much more intentional manner. Perhaps they were racing each other or attempting a dangerous passing maneuver as they thundered down the interstate together. The fact that both rigs approached in tandem suggests they might have been side by side, pacing each other aggressively. In such a scenario, one truck could have misjudged the space or timing when Chongping changed lanes, leading to the fatal rear-end collision. If the truckers were in communication or knew each other, they might have decided together not to stop, each unwilling to incriminate the other, or themselves, in the aftermath. No one has ever been charged for the crime of running the Tamavong family off the road and the horrific consequences that followed. In Arizona, there's no statute of limitations for a fatal hit and run, so the driver could still face justice if identified even now. Even decades later, investigators quietly hope for a break in the case, a confession, a new witness, or a piece of evidence, but none has materialized thus far. To this day, the family still holds on to hope that someone, somewhere will come forward with the truth about what happened on that desolate Arizona highway in 1998. Until that day, the story of Chansami and Abby's deaths remains a haunting reminder of how two young lives can be cut short in an instant. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, don't forget to check out my podcast, merch store, and other channels. Just click the links in the description below. Kathy Malcomson was a 16-year-old from Stowe, Massachusetts, known for her bubbly, vivacious personality. In August 1985, she was eagerly anticipating a family celebration that weekend. Her older brother was hosting a high school graduation party. Kathy was a part-time cashier at a local IGA supermarket in nearby Hudson, a job she had started that summer. She didn't yet have a driver's license, so she usually rode her white 12-speed bicycle for the 3-mile trip to work. Kathy was happy at home and excited about upcoming events, giving her family no reason to suspect she would ever disappear by choice. On Tuesday, August 13th, 1985, Kathy spent the early afternoon at home eating lunch in the backyard with her father, John Malcomson. It was a sunny day, and around 1:30 p.m., she got ready to leave for her shift at the supermarket. Wearing a striped shirt, light blue slacks, sneakers, and a few pieces of jewelry, she grabbed her gray purse, hopped on her bicycle, and headed down Route 62 toward Hudson. The store was only about a 15-minute ride away, and Kathy promised to be home in time for her brother's party preparations. As she pedaled away from the house on her 12-speed bike, little did her family know it was the last time they would ever see her. When Kathy never showed up for her shift that afternoon, her co-workers grew concerned. By 3 p.m., a supermarket employee phoned the Malcomson home to ask why Kathy hadn't arrived. This was completely out of character for a responsible teen who was always punctual. Kathy's parents immediately knew something was wrong. They began calling around to friends and family, but nobody had seen or heard from her. Realizing Kathy had vanished during the short bike trip, the family contacted the Stowe police to report her missing. In the crucial early hours, police assumed Kathy might have run away, a common conclusion for a missing teen in 1985. Her parents adamantly disagreed. Kathy had left behind all her belongings, and she had been excited for her brother's upcoming graduation party, leaving her family certain she did not vanish by choice. Unfortunately, this runaway label initially dulled the urgency of the police response. Despite the sluggish non-response by the local cops, friends and family wasted no time mobilizing. They printed and distributed flyers bearing Kathy's photo across Stowe and neighboring communities. Volunteers and, in time, the local authorities scoured the route Kathy would have taken to Hudson, hoping for any clue. However, those initial searches turned up nothing. No witnesses, no accident scene, and no trace of Kathy or her bicycle. For a long time, the case stalled and months passed with no breakthrough. 18 months later, a tangible clue finally surfaced. In early 1987, a man walking through a wooded area along Route 62 in Hudson found an abandoned bicycle. A friend recognized it from news reports and alerted police, who confirmed it was Kathy's missing 12-speed bike. It had been hidden in brush just a few yards from the road, about a mile from Kathy's house just over the Stowe town line. The bike's rear wheel was warped, as if it had been struck or thrown with force. This discovery spurred new search efforts in the area where the bike was recovered. In early 1987, police scoured that area with search dogs on 2 occasions, but came up empty. These searches yielded no additional clues, no clothing, no personal belongings, and no remains were found. The bicycle ended up being the only piece of physical evidence ever recovered in Kathy's case. Its location indicated that Kathy never made it to her workplace that day, and it reinforced what her family had believed all along. She hadn't run away, but rather met with foul play. With the case now clearly an involuntary disappearance, investigators considered several theories. With the runaway theory ruled out, the focus turned to abduction. One possibility was that Kathy fell prey to a predator operating in the area during the mid-1980s. On October 9, 1985, 9-year-old Sarah Pryor also disappeared from a nearby town under strikingly similar circumstances. In November 1985, just weeks after Sarah's disappearance, police arrested John Robert Wordie for attempting to abduct a woman at knife point in Newton. Wordie had a violent past. He'd been convicted of slaying a 15-year-old girl in Texas in 1967 and was on parole in Massachusetts in 1985. Given his record and proximity, Wordie soon emerged as a prime suspect in both Kathy's and Sarah's cases. He lived in the area and couldn't provide a solid alibi for the days the 2 girls went missing. And just as a quick aside, I really have to question how this guy was out despite doing what he did to that 15-year-old. That seems to me to be a situation where the offender should, at minimum, be locked up for life. In 1998, the Middlesex District Attorney publicly asserted that the Malcomson and Pryor cases were likely linked. He noted that 2 girls had vanished in broad daylight within months of each other in the same region. This strong statement underscored the belief that a single culprit was responsible for both disappearances. Despite the suspicions, hard evidence was lacking. Wordie was questioned about Kathy and Sarah's cases multiple times over the years, but he always denied any involvement. He was never charged in either case due to the absence of concrete proof tying him to the crimes. After the 1985 Newton incident, Wordie served a prison sentence for that attack, which violated his parole for the earlier slaying. As a result, he was sent back to Texas on the parole violation and remained imprisoned until his death in 2022, still maintaining his innocence in Kathy's case. Investigators have not publicly identified any other major suspects in Kathy's disappearance. The prevailing theory remains that she was abducted by a stranger, quite possibly Wordy, or someone with a similar predatory profile, as she rode her bike on that August afternoon. Aside from Wordy, no other suspect has ever been identified in Kathy's case. Some have speculated about unknown predators, or even an accidental scenario, but nothing concrete supports those ideas. For instance, it's been theorized that she may have been struck by a drunk driver, who disposed of her body in an attempt to cover up the crime. Today, Kathy Malcomson's fate remains unknown. No trace of her has ever been found, but the case is far from forgotten, and Kathy's family and the investigators continue to seek answers in her case. In the summer of 2002, a 19-year-old traveler named Russell Turkott vanished while hitchhiking across the northern plains. Turkott, a free-spirited young man from Wolf Point, Montana, was on his way home from an event in Michigan when he disappeared in North Dakota. Nearly 4 months later, a grim discovery confirmed his family's worst fears. Turcott's body was found in a remote shelter belt near U.S. Highway 2, not far from Devil's Lake, North Dakota. His death was ruled to be a slaying, yet over 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved. Russell Turkott was last seen alive on July 12, 2002, at a truck stop gas station on the outskirts of Grand Forks, North Dakota. He had spent the previous night with friends in Fargo and was planning to return to Montana for a family wedding. Despite this case taking place in 2002, Turkott was hitchhiking west along U.S. Highway 2. This was a time when hitchhiking had already gone out of style due to the associated dangers. Notably, reports on this case indicate that Russell was very trusting and easygoing, which is perhaps why he still had faith in the hitchhiking systems that previous generations enjoyed. Unfortunately, it's believed that this trust in others would be the end of him. Late on the night of July 13th, he phoned his mother from Simonson's truck stop in Grand Forks and told her he needed money for a bus ticket home. His mother promised to wire $100 to him the next morning, which he could pick up and use to travel more quickly. However, Turkott never retrieved that money, and he never made it home. After that last phone call, he simply vanished off the face of the earth. Turcott's family immediately grew concerned when he failed to check in or arrive as expected. His mother, Linda Hansen, later said that things were very wrong when the wired money went unclaimed, and sadly, Linda's motherly intuition would prove correct. The very next day, she sent one of her older sons to Grand Forks to report Russell missing and to search for any sign of him. Unfortunately, the initial response from law enforcement was not encouraging. Grand Forks police reportedly told the brother to come back the next day and instructed the family to file a missing person report with their local authorities in Montana instead. This procedural delay meant that precious early hours and days passed with little action. At 19, Turkott was legally an adult, and it appears his transient hitchhiking lifestyle led police to assume he might have simply moved on voluntarily. Family members, however, knew that his sudden silence was out of character and persisted in urging a search. For months, Turcott's family and friends endured an agonizing uncertainty. Their worst fears were confirmed on November 5th, 2002, when a rancher in Ramsey County, North Dakota, made a gruesome find. While checking a remote tree line for stray cattle, the farmer stumbled across human remains lying face down among the trees. The body was identified as Russell Turkott. Investigators noted the state of the remains indicated they had been there for quite some time. possibly since late July or early August 2002. This placed the location around 100 miles west of the Grand Forks truck stop where Russell was last seen. This remote spot, concealed by rows of trees amid open farmland, would be hard to find unless one knew the area. Authorities later revealed that his death was caused by blunt force trauma to the back of the head, confirming he had been violently slain. Notably, Russell's clothing and the backpack he had with him were never recovered at the scene, indicating that whoever was responsible may have taken or hidden his belongings. Multiple law enforcement agencies became involved, yet the investigation was hampered by early missteps and jurisdictional confusion. Because Turkott went missing in Grand Forks, but was found in Ramsey County, questions arose about which agency should lead the case. Initially, North Dakota Highway Patrol officers secured the scene, but they wouldn't be taking lead in this investigation. The Grand Forks Police Department, the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department, and the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation all played roles as the case unfolded. Eventually, the case was assigned under Grand Forks Police jurisdiction, as that was where he was last seen. Some have speculated this game of jurisdictional hot potato significantly hampered the investigation. The cops have been tight-lipped about the investigation to preserve the integrity of the case. While they did indicate that additional evidence was found at the scene, it remains unclear whether there was any DNA recovered, which may be used to solve the slaying. With no arrests made and no publicly identified suspects, several theories have emerged about who might be responsible for Russell Turcott's death. One of the most prominent theories involves the late Joseph Edward Duncan, a convicted serial offender. It later came to light that he was living in Fargo at the time of Turcott's disappearance. However, law enforcement never declared Duncan an official suspect, noting that no direct evidence proved he was involved. Skeptics of this theory point out that Duncan's known victims were generally younger, whereas Turkott was 19. Even so, Turkott was described as trusting and somewhat vulnerable, and it's conceivable he might have accepted a ride from a stranger offering help. The Duncan theory remains unconfirmed, and Duncan died in 2021 while on death row, taking any secrets he held with him. That said, there's no evidence to tie him to the crime beyond the circumstantial theories. Another theory focuses on the possibility of a more local perpetrator, perhaps someone familiar with the rural area where Russell's body was dumped. The remote area near Devil's Lake isn't a place easily found by a passerby, which suggests the perpetrator knew the region's back roads. Ultimately, whether this case will be solved or not, turns upon the nature of the evidence the authorities were able to gather from the scene. As I mentioned, they've been tight-lipped about what they've got, but if they have DNA, the Duncan theory can clearly be ruled out. However, if they do have biological evidence from the perpetrator, it's only a matter of time before genetic genealogy cracks this case wide open. On September 25, 1981, a disturbing tragedy struck the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees as 58-year-old Polly Melton hiked along the Deep Creek Trail with two close friends. Polly was moving a bit slower than usual that day, prompting some playful teasing from her companions. Polly wasn't about to take the gentle ribbing lightly, and decided to prove to her friends that she still had some athleticism left. She jogged ahead of them on the easy, familiar trail, rounding a bend and disappearing over a small hill. It was all in good fun, or so it seemed at the time. But when Polly's friends crested that same rise just moments later, she was gone. Over a hill and out of sight, Polly Melton had vanished without a trace. Polly's friends thought she must have jogged on back to camp and didn't initially think much of this. After all, They had teased her about how slow she was that day, so perhaps she wanted to get back in record time. It was around 4:30 p.m. when they reached the Deep Creek campground where Polly and her husband were staying. They expected to find Polly relaxing at their campsite after the hike. Instead, they found only Polly's husband, Bob Melton, waiting inside their Airstream trailer, and he hadn't seen Polly at all. Bob, who was 20 years Polly's senior and in frail health, had stayed behind that afternoon. He assumed the women were simply enjoying a longer hike. When Polly's friends arrived without her, worry set in immediately. The group retraced their steps, calling out Polly's name and searching up and down the trail. Other hikers on Deep Creek Trail were asked if they'd seen a tall woman in a pink sleeveless blouse, but no one had. After nearly 2 hours of frantic searching on their own, Polly's friends and husband knew something was very wrong. They contacted park rangers around 6 p.m. and reported Polly Melton missing. Rangers and local authorities sprang into action that evening. Deep Creek Trail, normally a popular easy path near the North Carolina-Tennessee border of the park, was closed to the public as search teams poured in. Over the next week, more than 150 volunteers combed the woods, assisted by park rangers, law enforcement, and search dogs. The searchers scoured miles of trails, thick forest, and the banks of Deep Creek itself, looking for any sign of Polly. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and horse-mounted searchers patrolled remote areas. For 4 days straight, teams methodically covered the area where Polly was last seen and beyond. They found nothing, no scraps of clothing, no footprints leading off trail, no broken branches or disturbed brush. The only clue was fleeting. One of the bloodhounds caught Polly's scent on the trail near the spot where she'd disappeared, beside a downed tree where it seemed she may have paused to rest. But beyond that point, the scent trail evaporated. The canine handlers described the dog circling and whining, confused, as if Polly had simply vanished into thin air. By October 2nd, 1981, after a week of fruitless effort, the official search was scaled back. Though the active search ended, the investigation was just beginning. Family, friends, and authorities were left with a haunting question: what happened to Polly Melton? In trying to solve the mystery, the authorities had to understand who Polly was. Polly Melton was, by all accounts, a friendly, outdoorsy woman enjoying the dawn of her golden years. Born in 1923, Polly had seen a lot of life by her late 50s. She had been widowed twice before finding love again with Bob Melton, an elderly man whom she married in 1975. The couple split their time between Jacksonville, Florida, and the Great Smoky Mountains, where they spent the warmer months living out of their 19-foot Airstream trailer. Polly had no children of her own, so she poured her energy into friendships, her church community, and volunteer work. Every fall at Deep Creek Campground, Polly volunteered daily at a local senior center, helping to serve meals to elderly residents. But everything wasn't sunshine and roses, and as investigators dug into her past more, they turned up some potentially groundbreaking clues. Investigators also learned that Polly had been under some emotional strain earlier that year. She was still grieving her mother's death in 1978, an event that had sent her into a period of deep depression. Friends, however, said Polly seemed to be feeling better lately, and that she was back to her cheerful self for the most part. However, the medical records ended up telling a somewhat different story. Interestingly, she had also been prescribed Valium a couple years before, but supposedly stopped taking it by 1981. After Polly vanished, Bob discovered that an entire bottle of his own prescription Valium was missing from their trailer. As the weeks and months passed, several credible theories emerged as to what happened to Polly Melton. One major theory was that Polly left of her own free will, essentially vanishing into a new life. Supporters of this idea pieced together a narrative from those odd clues. Perhaps Polly had been unhappy in her life and quietly planned to run away. Being married to Bob, who at 78 was much older and in poor health, might have left Polly feeling lonely. On the hike, when the opportunity arose, Polly could have hurried ahead of her friends intentionally. Deep Creek Trail isn't very remote. In fact, it eventually leads near a road and parking area by the campground. Some have questioned whether someone could have been waiting there to pick her up. If Polly had a secret companion or lover, they might have used the brief window when she was out of sight to meet her, whisking her away by car. One tantalizing piece of evidence gives some weight to the voluntary getaway theory. In April 1982, about 6 months after Polly vanished, a check made out to Thelma Pauline Melton, her full legal name, was cashed at a bank in Birmingham, Alabama. The check was reportedly an interest payment from one of Polly's investments. It wasn't a huge sum, but it was enough to raise eyebrows. Investigators followed up on this, hoping it meant Polly had resurfaced. Birmingham was roughly 300 miles from where she disappeared, and coincidentally Polly had been born in Alabama and still had some relatives there. Unfortunately, this clue led nowhere conclusive. The bank couldn't definitively prove who cashed the check. The signature was Polly's name, but whether it was her handwriting or someone forging it was uncertain. No additional money was withdrawn from Polly's accounts, and no sightings of her were confirmed in Alabama or anywhere else. Naturally, some have speculated that this had actually been one of Polly's family members, forging her signature and cashing the check. Another factor I should mention here is the fact that no crime had been committed, so it's almost certain a forensic accountant wasn't retained to fully go through her finances. So it's always possible something was missed, which perhaps proved further financial activity by Polly after she vanished. Another theory considers foul play, though it's a perplexing scenario given the circumstances. If Polly was attacked or abducted on the trail, it would have had to happen in an extremely short window of time and space. It would have basically had to happen in the moments after she went around the bend and before her friends caught up. Park investigators noted there were no footprints or drag marks indicating someone left the trail, and no suspicious strangers were reported in the area. That said, she was believed to have been wearing expensive jewelry at the time of her disappearance. To give just one example, she was wearing a diamond-studded gold watch, an item that could have attracted attention for someone who committed a crime of opportunity. There's also the very real potential that she used Bob's bottle of Valium to ensure September 25th was her final day on Earth. She had experienced significant depression after her mother's death. Further, her husband was in increasingly poor health, and reports indicate that Bob actually had to be moved to a nursing home after Polly went missing. It's possible that the weight of it all just finally broke her, and she went deep into the woods, emptied the bottle, and was never found. Whatever the scenario, her case remains yet another instance of an individual seemingly swallowed up by the Great Smokies. Pyramid power refers to the idea that pyramids, whether ancient structures like the Great Pyramid of Giza or modern replicas, have unique energy properties. These properties are thought to be capable of preserving, healing, and even enhancing human life. The fascination with pyramids dates back thousands of years. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2560 BC during Egypt's 4th dynasty, has always been a source of wonder due to its scale, precision, and just general mystery. While ancient Egyptians likely constructed the pyramids as tombs for pharaohs and monuments to their gods, their purpose became a focal point for speculative theories over time. And just to put things in perspective for a minute here, when ancient Romans, Greeks, and Persians looked at the Great Pyramids, it was ancient history to them. The modern concept of pyramid power gained traction in the 20th century. Much of it is attributed to Antoine Bovis, a French hardware store owner in the 1930s. Bovis reportedly visited the Great Pyramid and noticed that dead animals found inside appeared mummified rather than decayed. He hypothesized that the pyramid's unique geometry created an environment conducive to preservation. Inspired by this observation, Bovis experimented with scale models of pyramids and claimed they could mummify organic matter, sharpen razor blades, and even improve health. The idea went viral in the 1970s through Patrick Flanagan, a New Age author and inventor. Flanagan's book, Pyramid Power: The Secret Energy of the Ancients, popularized the idea that pyramids harness a mysterious form of energy. He and others claimed that pyramid energy was responsible for healing properties, increased spiritual awareness, and improved plant growth. Proponents of pyramid power suggest that pyramids generate an energy field due to their specific shape and proportions. Supporters argue that pyramid power arises from the pyramid's geometry, which supposedly focuses and amplifies universal energy or cosmic vibrations. This theory is grounded more in metaphysical beliefs than science. Advocates frequently compare pyramid energy to concepts like qi in Chinese medicine or prana in Indian philosophy, vital forces believed to flow through all living things. Some proponents suggest that the pyramid acts as an antenna for these energies, channeling them into a concentrated area. Despite its popularity among enthusiasts, pyramid power lacks a clear, testable mechanism. The claims often rely on anecdotal evidence and subjective experiences rather than rigorous experimentation. The scientific community has been skeptical of pyramid power since its inception. Researchers have tested many of the claims, but have consistently failed to find evidence supporting the existence of a unique pyramid energy field. One of the earliest and most enduring claims is that pyramids preserve organic material. However, controlled experiments have shown no significant difference between items placed under pyramids and those in similar conditions outside pyramids. Factors like airflow, humidity, and temperature are more likely to explain the observed effects. In the 1970s, scientists tested the idea that pyramids could sharpen dull razor blades, a claim advocated for by some pyramid power proponents. Studies revealed that any perceived improvement in blade sharpness was subjective and likely due to psychological bias. The physical properties of the blades remained unchanged. Some enthusiasts claim that plants grow better under pyramids, but controlled experiments have produced mixed results. In most cases, differences in growth are attributed to environmental factors, not pyramid geometry. Pyramid power as a tool for healing and energy enhancement lacks empirical support. While meditation under a pyramid may feel more profound for some individuals, it's been hypothesized that this is likely due to the placebo effect. I note that pyramid power as a belief system appears to have faded substantially since its heyday in the 1970s.